And we are on the air. Good morning, everybody, on this chilly, wintry morning. Jim, take it away. I'm afraid I can't hear anything in here.
And Board Treasurer.
There we go.
Good morning, I'm Tressa Setlack, I'm a board member.
Yeah, John, you're next alphabetically.
John Walters, board member.
Janice, you're next. Yeah, we may be having some connection difficulties with Janice Walthour. But looking, we have enough really.
Walthour, board member, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, we can hear you now.
Thank you.
All right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, in addition to the introduction, that establishes a quorum for the meeting. So the first item on the agenda is the approval of the last meeting, January meeting minutes. So I'll make the motion to accept the minutes. Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, before we vote, if you look at the minutes themselves, though, the first line under the minutes really needs to be taken out. There was no vote on retaining the existing SMCL and Smyrla board members. Of course, our board is determined through a process and not by a formal vote of the board. And secondly, we don't normally vote on the Smyrla board until March. So that line item should be taken out. We discussed the needs for the Smyrla board, but there was no vote conducted.
So Jim, you didn't keep.
I'll move to amend.
Question?
Yeah, go ahead.
You didn't.
Phyllis?
You didn't. The board doc system lost minutes, so on my notes. But didn't they?
Phyllis, we can't hear you.
Our existing.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Phyllis.
Didn't they vote to keep our existing members?
No, we don't vote on board members. We did vote on the board officers, but I think that's mentioned further in the minutes.
Okay, hold on. So, didn't you vote? I think in that reference, I was talking about our members who are on the Smyrla board.
Yeah, and that's later on. That's later in the minutes. So that is the fourth bullet point under that main heading will be kept, but the first one, the Smyrla members, is what we're talking about.
But no, we're still wrong. We voted for the officers of the library board. I asked the members of the library board to consider joining the Smyrla board, but no vote was taken. So neither case was a real vote involved.
In any case, the first bullet point you've said needs to be removed, and John has voted to amend the minutes.
Right.
I second.
I second. In favor of approving the amended minutes, please indicate. We'll do it by voice. Indicate aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, the second item on the agenda is the EALs. Again, I'll make a motion to accept the EALs, and I need a second.
I second.
Okay, Carolyn seconds. Before I conduct the vote again, Phyllis, I always focus on things that may have not have seen before. May have, I just don't recall it. But there was two items, and typically I look at things that are more substantial in cost. The two that stuck out in that vein was KG Incorporated, which is almost $7,000, and Comstar Tech. Can you explain what those two are?
Comstar is the wiring we're doing for the VoIP phone systems in Hall and Lexi. And what was the other one?
Yeah, KG, K-A-G-E-E-T.
Khajiit, that's the hotspots.
Okay.
The hotspots
Okay.
get re-upped, and we did expand the number of them.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
I also had a question about the commissioners of Leonardtown. What is that for?
Okay. What they've done with the new Leonardtown Library is the commissioners of Leonardtown, we have a separate meter for water, sewer, and trash. But the propane, which heats the building, and the electric are on one meter, and we split that on a quarterly basis with the county commissioners. They invoice us.
Okay, any more questions? And it's good to see you here now, Michael. We started late, so you didn't really miss very much. As you can see where we're at in terms of the agenda.
Thank you very
Any other
much.
questions? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay, motion carries. Okay, Sandy, you're up.
As a footnote to that, is it possible where something like that pops up irregularly or regularly, but over a long distance of time, that it could be footnoted in the report?
I'm sorry, Mr. Walters, I don't know what you're talking about.
where you had
I'll
that-
work with Belinda on that, and Belinda will be introducing herself in a moment here, moving forward. Just if it's something that's an unusual expense or a one-time, relatively rare thing, we can make note of that.
Yeah, and I would restrict it to things that are fairly substantial in dollars, but again, I don't want to define substantial, but yeah, so we don't want to get into too many expenses that are relatively low. Sandy?
Okay, before I start, if everybody could mute that's not talking, we're getting a lot of feedback, and I don't know if that will help or not, but several of us are unmuted. So our treasurer report for February 3rd was run on February 3rd. Our PNC checking account opening balance in January, on January 7th, was $710, and the current balance on February 3rd was also $710, so no change in that account. For the Vanguard investment accounts, the original account had a value on 1/7/21 of $76,275.42. No deposits or withdrawals, with a share price of $10.75. 7,095.388 shares owned with a yield of 1.35%. The account value on February 3rd was $76,248.79. The share price was $10.74. Shares owned 7,098.770. It paid a dividend of $36.29 on January 29th, which that is the calendar total so far. The yield was 1.111%, and the change in share price was minus 1 cent. For the Rudolph account on 1/7, it was $18,912.39. There were no deposits or withdrawals. Share price was at $10.75. The shares owned were 1,759.292 for a yield of 1.25%. The account value on February 3rd was $18,902.21. Share price was $10.74. Shares owned on February 3rd were 1,759.982. A dividend of $7.40 was paid on January 29th. The yield was 1.01%, and the change in share price again was minus 1 cent. These are the lowest dividends I've ever seen reported on these accounts, and I'm not savvy enough, honestly, to know why, but I just wanted to call your attention to that. Usually we're getting at least $100 on the original account and somewhere around 30 on the Rudolph.
May I ask a question, Sandy?
Not now. Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. You use the word dividends. Do you really mean interest payments?
We get a dividend on these accounts. It's reported as dividend and then it's reinvested. It's automatically reinvested.
But what are the accounts actually invested in?
I honestly don't have a lot of information on that. I believe they're bond funds with Vanguard. Honestly, John, I inherited this and I've done more maintenance on it than anything else, just making sure that we have money to pay out the accounts. I don't have a lot of the information that with your background you're going to be asking for.
Okay. Maybe you and I can put our heads together at some point and see if we can sort this out a little bit.
Sure.
Thank you.
I know I've got to get off here.
Yeah, John, just as a quick point, and again, you'll see that a little bit, but I don't understand all of the investments that are in these funds, but we're really any investment that not only the libraries, but also Smyrla invest in has to be but a conservative investment. So, but yeah, I appreciate it. I think it's a good idea that we look into these, and you certainly have the expertise to do so. Okay, so I'll make the motion to accept the treasurer's report. I need a second.
Second.
Hey, John, thank you. Any questions, comments? Okay, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay. All right, the next item on the agenda is Smyrla. I'm going to take a few minutes because we're going to face an issue not only at Smyrla, but also in the county board. I'm sorry, I'm muted because of the clock going off. Basically, at the last meeting, I asked if anybody on the current county board would consider joining the Smyrla board, and no one has really come forward. Now, we will meet in March. The date is March 9th. So fundamentally, we will only have 2 members on the Smyrla board. But the issue runs deeper than that. And again, I understand because the problem we have, if you look at the current board, of course, I'm on Smyrla. Carolyn's on Smyrla currently, but she's coming off. And I'd get a little bit of history. Carolyn had been on the board for a long time. Came off of it, as all of us do. But I had asked her if she would consider coming back on for the period of time we were voting a new CEO. So we'd have balance between all 3 counties. So she did that as a favor to me. But if you look at the board, Janice has been on the board for a period of time. So the number of potential board members then starts to dwindle. So there are very few that we can draw from because so many have been or on the board. The current Smyrla board member or the members that will continue will be me and Beth. And again, just for education purposes, the Smyrla board consists of 3 members from each county. 1 member can be a non-library board member, and that's what the role that Beth assumes now. Again, to further complicate this, and Sandy and I have talked about this, or at least shared an email about it, Sandy is going to be coming off the board at the end of this first term, which is the end of the calendar year. I was planning to share that with the group around mid-year so that I could really seek someone to take over the treasurer role and allow enough time for transition, which I think we've never seen, including Sandy, was never given enough lead time before accepting the role. So we're going to have, and then to further complicate the issue, on the Smyrla board, I come off, I haven't told the board this, but in March of 2022, I will come off the board. So we have a real dilemma that you're going to have fundamentally 2 brand new members coming on in January of 2022, and if we still have 2 members representing St. Mary's, you'll be down to 1. But it places the burden on a relatively small number of you because we are going to experience a significant change in the overall board makeup by the end of 2022. But unless somebody steps up to take on a role within Smyrna and also the treasurer's role, we're going to have a problem in both areas. So again, something to think about. Now we're going to work beginning this next meeting as a Smyrna board. I have to switch back and forth, but as a Smyrna board to see, are there things we can do that will encourage people or just make it easier to participate in the Smyrna board. But I don't know what we'll do yet. Obviously, we haven't talked about it there. So again, it just to point out, we're going to run into some dilemmas both on our board, but also on the Smyrna board. And I have very confidence in the other counties and their representation to look to do things which promote all 3 libraries equally. But when you have one member from a single county, it does create an imbalance. So it's just something to consider because it's an issue that we are facing now and will continue to face even more so in the future. So I'm not asking for anything, but I need you to be aware of it. We'll continue with 2 members in Smyrna, but eventually the issue is going to get worse. Michael?
Jim, can you share more about the time commitment to be on the Smyrna board, what time the meetings are, things like that?
Well, again, Michael, we're going to talk about some of that, but currently, you're elected for a 3-year period, number 1. Number 2, we meet once a month. Now, again, without sort of conveying some of the thoughts we have, and we'll discuss, do we continue in a Zoom forum going forward, even after the crisis diminishes, simply because of the convenience factor? And we will talk about, we have a lot of projects coming up, but at some point in time, could we even reduce the number of board meetings to maybe half? So again, it makes it easier. We're facing this problem now. Charles County, and Carolyn can attest, Charles County has faced this problem in the past. Calvert to some degree, but not as severely. So it's a universal problem. Okay, any other questions? Okay, I'll move on to the other things. Just again, as background, the county, the Smyrna board really functions as the primary board, but there is a corporate board. The corporate board consists of all the members of all 3 counties. So in effect, all of you are on the corporate board. And so we do have an annual meeting in which we make presentations, changes for a decision, but also for information too. So you will receive an email, likely email. We should send a mail by post office, but inviting you to the corporate board, which again will be on March 9th. Obviously, it'll be in a Zoom format. So just to let you know what you'll be receiving. Okay, the other issue is that and again, the highlights of the meetings. Again, we're 1 month behind because even this month, because we're meeting right after this on Tuesday. But going back a month, some of the things we did talk about were primarily about the corporate meeting, but also we set up a subcommittee to look at new member orientation. That was a project that was started a while ago, never fully completed, and frankly, I wasn't pleased with its content. So Carolyn has asked them to work with Ashley on reviewing new member orientation, and that's a subcommittee of sorts. We did change the reimbursement policy to expand eligibility. And again, I need to give you a little bit of history. Basically, Smyrna pays the tuition for employees of all three library systems. Now, the policy was restricted to a master's and a certain dollar amount per library. That's been eliminated, and the number of academic options has been expanded. Because obviously, especially in the age of technology, there are other disciplines that are as much value as an MLS to the operations primarily of SMERLA, but even the libraries themselves. So we've expanded we've also expanded to undergraduates programs. So again, to encourage education among the library staffs in all three counties. And lastly, we've set up a trustee page under the SMERLA umbrella for just for more information about boards, the minutes, and so forth. So that's not fully operational yet, but will be very shortly. Okay, so that's all I have on SMERLA. We got a little bit longer than normal, but any questions or? Okay, if not, I'll pass it over to Michael.
All right, thank you very much, Jim. We don't have a particularly full agenda this morning, but a number of things to bring to your attention. First of all, this will be Phyllis's last board meeting. She has opted to retire after 18 plus years. And Phyllis, I just wish to commend you for your service to St. Mary's County Library. And thank you for all that you have done to keep us going over the years. I think you have a number of things to be very proud of, but certainly a clean audit the last 4+ years, and expecting another one this upcoming year. So thank you for that. Anything you wish to say? And I see a head shake, so she says is saying no. But we will be having some celebrations for Phyllis coming up here. And again, thank you for your service to St. Mary's County Library. Second, with us today is Belinda Lloyd, who is taking over as the office manager and HR specialist. And Belinda, if you could please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Belinda Lloyd. I've actually been with the library for 5 years as a librarian in different areas, and I do have some HR and payroll background.
Any questions for Belinda? I see a little bit of applause there. Thank you. So, moving on then. Yes.
Can I just jump in?
Sure. Yeah, please.
Janice, you go ahead.
We just said.
I'm sorry. Anyways, just to say, Belinda, welcome aboard. We're really happy to have you. You have big shoes to fill. And Phyllis, thank you so much. I'm so glad in this public forum where we can embarrass you the most, we can just thank you for your amazing work and your incredible service to the library. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. No, it was just a matter of looking at life after this COVID and where we wanted to go.
And thank you again, Phyllis. You've helped me too in certain situations where I've needed information. I'm glad, Michael, by the way, you said that you're replacing the position. You're not replacing Phyllis, because Phyllis is irreplaceable.
Oh, yes, and we've seen quite a number of notable retirements this year. I think that the pandemic certainly does have something to do with it, and I'm told that this is something that's happening all across the state in libraries. Is that people who have been long-term employees just sort of, we're not necessarily planning retirement, but in light of this are saying, all right, well, what are my priorities moving forward? So we do thank Phyllis for her great work, and Belinda, welcome. Yes, you do have big shoes to fill, but we'll be working with you. Go ahead and take a look at the budget. There's a few areas of concern I'd like to talk about. The 58% of the year has elapsed as of this point, and there's a couple of areas where we're over budget and one area where we are under budget that I'd just like to address and say that we're aware of this and we're going to work on it. The Leonardtown salaries are at 64%, and in part that's just because of buyouts from some long-term employees. If people have a certain amount of leave built up and it's not sick leave, that doesn't count. That's rolled over into retirement. But of personal leave are built up of regular leave, then when they leave, we do owe a certain percentage, and we had that with a couple of people who retired officially in December. Administration at 64%, and I think that may be because we are now counting IT employees as part of administration and not as we formerly did as part of working in the branches. So that would explain that one. But we are aware of those. And that's also going to explain why administrative health insurance is up. We have had those IT folks now counted as part of administration, and one took health insurance when the person in the slot before had not. So that explains those rises, and we'll just have to adjust what those figures should look like for the upcoming year. Of course, we have people eligible to come on if they take a new job with us, but also it's hard to budget for health insurance because we pretty much find out in May if people are going to be coming on board, and so we won't have budgeted that for the prior year starting in July. So it can be a difficult thing to kind of figure out. But overall, personnel services at 59%, and that's not sort of too far off from our target. I think by the end of the year we'll be back right about where we're supposed to be. If you look at the utilities, you'll see that Leonardtown Electric, water, sewer, and trash, and heating are all very much over the current target. We have asked the county for more money to put into those budget lines. Overall, it's not a particular high amount. The percentage makes it look worse than it is. But for example, we're now heating the new building with gas, and the old one was heated with oil, and we're finding it substantially more expensive. So we did ask the county to give us money for those budget lines as part of our request this year, and we'll see if that comes through or not. If you look over on under operating supplies, you see that circulation services, that's our materials, is at 48%. In part, there's a slow start there because the publishers weren't putting out a lot, and Smyrla was not doing some processing last July and August. We will catch that up and make sure that we're spending our materials budget before the end of the year. Accounting and audit and payroll services, we pay out ahead on those, and those I'm anticipating will be normal for the year. Memberships at 67%. Again, a lot of those are paid out on, at the start of the year. So again, I'm not anticipating there being any issues there. Overall, the total expenses is at 57%, and we're at 58% of the year lapse. So we're within tolerance on our budget. Any questions about the budget? And as I said, that's kind of why we're seeing some higher totals in some of the budget lines. Speaking of the budget, we've arranged for next board meeting in March to get a report from Asset Services. They're the ones who administer our OPEB account. And so that amount is currently a little over $1 million, and they want to review where the investments are and talk to you about those and see if you wish to make any changes in how the investments are done. So before then, I will make sure that you have a chance to see the portfolio again and can be informed about the conversation next month. So when it's asset strategies, when they come to talk with you about how those investments are, and John, I'm sure you're going to be particularly interested in this and can give us some good advice on what you think that investment portfolio is looking like.
I do have a question. Whoops, a minute.
Yes. I'm afraid I can't hear you. You've muted yourself. I will unmute you, I hope. Please unmute yourself, John.
How about now?
There we go. Now you're set.
Okay. All right. Are those funds not a part of the consolidation that the Sheriff's Department and several other groups went through?
Ours are separate. We have a separate fund. It's our own OPEB. So I would say that no, that these are all our funds.
Okay, thank you.
The library's finances are separate from the county's.
Okay, that would explain that. Is there any chance that I could see any of that material prior to the meeting with those folks?
I'm going to make sure that everybody has a chance, but yes, I have that information, and I will get it to you.
Thank you.
Just making a note to make sure of that. Thank you. Don't have much of a way of updates from the FOL or the foundation. The FOL is continuing with its online sales. Unfortunately, in the sorting room there, they were replacing the roof, and that led to a few leaks. So some of the materials got wet, and it did ruin the Wi-Fi portable Wi-Fi device we had given them. We've replaced that, so they're moving on, and still taking donations on Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 10 to 2. So with any luck, the leaks will be fixed as part of that roofing effort. Jim, you already talked about board membership, so we don't need to worry about that as an item unless you have something you want to add at this point.
No, nothing to add.
Okay. At the end of the month, we're going to have the Black Men in White Coats program, and we're working on getting a panel discussion together. This is a film that's about the fact that fewer black men are applying to be in medical school now than did in 1967, and explores the why of that. And so we're going to be having that program starting on the 26th of February. People will be able to log in at our website, get a unique code, and we'll have up to 2,000 views of that movie. And then we're going to conclude with a panel discussion. And Kelsey Bush, who works for St. Mary's College, has agreed to be the moderator for that. He did a fantastic job moderating the Martin Luther King Jr. prayer breakfast. And so we saw talent and snagged it. Thank you, Kelsey, for agreeing to be our moderator. So right now we're trying to get some people from the medical profession around St. Mary's and Southern Maryland really to serve as moderators, as panelists on that and talk about that. And so far we've got some help from Christine Ray from the hospital here in St. Mary's, who talked about a number of people she thought would be outstanding for that panel. So we're trying to finalize that this week and start to really promote this program. We are working on this program with St. Mary's County Public Schools, with the Unified Committee for African American Contributions, with the NAACP here in St. Mary's, with Historic Solderly, with the Dismantling Racism program. So it's getting quite a bit of visibility through partnerships and through those people sharing the word about it. I'm hopeful that we're going to have a lot of people view the film and a lot of people participate in the discussion about that, which will be in March. And the final date and time for that discussion will be coming out soon. You can already sign up on our website to do a viewing of the movie. So I encourage you to consider that. Any questions on
Can I
that?
ask a question?
Yes, please.
Have you thought about inviting Jerome Adams?
If you're talking about the Surgeon General?
Formerly.
Yes, we have somebody. He actually is a graduate of the public schools here, and his father worked for the schools, and we have somebody from the schools reaching out to him, and we're hoping that he will agree.
Excellent, thank you.
Mm-hmm. To be on the panel, yes. Other questions about that program? Quick legislative.
Michael?
Yes.
Michael, I'm
Yes.
sending in the chat also Dr. Joyce Neal, who was born, raised, educated here, and came back to be a doctor here in the county. So I'm sending that as well.
Oh, okay, great. If you make sure we have that contact, that would be wonderful.
Yeah. I sent it to someone, but I'm just reiterating.
All right. I don't know that I've seen it, so make sure I've got it.
Janice, can you email it to me?
Yeah, and Laura as well. We need to kind of make sure that we've got this person because we are looking for panel members.
Yeah, Michael, I realize, again, this has been started, but I sort of look at the title of it, though, and get a little concerned. Black men?
Yes,
white coats?
It is specifically, that's not our title for it, it's the title of the film.
Yeah, no, I realize that, but, all right.
All right, a quick legislative session update. The Senate did vote to override Governor Hogan's veto of the legislation last year that would give an increase in the capital budget, raising it from $5 million a year to $7.5 million a year. And of course, we took advantage of that to help build New Leonardtown Library. And giving some additional funding, we in St. Mary's looked like it would be about an additional $40,000 should the House also vote to override that veto. It's important to realize that that money will not be available for the fiscal year that starts in July. It will not be available until starting in July of 2022. So that's not funding we're going to be receiving immediately. Again, should that veto override occur, and but in fiscal year 2022, that funding is supposed to ensure that there is no fines at all for children. And there'll be a little bit of workaround for us on how to implement that, because fines for us are based not on age, other than of course our special children's fine-free card or the school cards. They're based, in fact, on materials type. So we'll be working to try to make sure that we're in compliance with that. And at the time, when the time comes, you'll have to agree to vote on some changes in our various policies and procedures, but for now, that's not necessary until we sort of have final say on what's going on. That money may allow us to be completely fine-free. It will simply depend on library services. Right now, as you saw in the budget, we're getting very, very little in terms of fines in. Typically, we were expecting around $45,000, and I think we've taken in about $6,000 in fines. The pandemic has really put the hurt on that. So at this rate, that would allow us to be just go ahead and go completely fine-free in the county. And 11 Maryland libraries have now done that. So I think that we, more than some others, have been in need of the revenue. We'll just have to see if this override happens and what it means for our overall budget. Last Friday, there was testimony in front of the House of Delegates about HB 518. That is the e-content bill. It would require any publisher who licenses content to the public in Maryland to license it to the library under reasonable terms. And we think that it will get out of committee, that it will get a favorable review. When we presented, and I was one of the people giving testimony, the legislators simply had no questions for us and seemed quite favorably disposed towards that. Just to reiterate that this is not an anti-publisher bill. I mean, we're not trying to say that the publisher's not giving us reasonable prices. We are saying we are happy to negotiate with the publishers and pay what they think is a reasonable cost. We're restricting the way we share the materials. It's not like this means suddenly that everybody who has a library card has access to anything. It'll be the same terms that we have already. It's just going to prevent publishers from, if they're licensing to our citizens, not giving it to libraries as well. So Amazon currently is not having its unique content available in libraries. Audible, the audio book division for Amazon basically is not a publisher called Blackstone, who puts out a lot of books, works with Audible, and has 10 titles a month that libraries cannot get. At least one publisher the prior year, although they're not doing it right now during the pandemic, was limiting access to titles for libraries, and this would stop them from backsliding once the pandemic is over. So we're hopeful that on Thursday we'll be presenting to that bill to the Senate, and we're hopeful that that will also get a favorable review, and that in both cases it will pass out of those committees, the Ways and Means committees, and go out to a full floor vote. Our lobbyists tells us it can be difficult the first year of legislation to see it pass. We are still hopeful, and that will make Maryland the first state that has legislation like this. It was proposed in New York and Rhode Island last year, but those sessions were closed due to COVID, and they were not acted on, and those legislations have not been reintroduced this year. So I think it would make us the first state that is looking out for library readers that way, and provide a template for other states to take action of that kind. Frankly, I think if it goes into effect, we'll just have to see what the results are. It would take effect July 1st of this year, and we just have to see what the publishers then would be doing in response to it. But as I say, it's not really an anti-publisher bill, it's just trying to get content for library readers. Any questions about any of those? A UVC WANS update. These are devices that kill the COVID virus on surfaces, non-porous surfaces, and we got some. There were two problems with them, unfortunately. Problem one is that the kind we got, we were told, by the nurse here, that's a good product, but when we got it, it turns out it was slightly different than the one we had seen demoed, and it does not take effect as quickly as we would like. That original one, which was much more expensive, decontaminates a surface in a matter of seconds, and this was going to take 1 to 2 minutes. So that's kind of a long time to be spending over, the various services we might have. The other problem is that what these things do is they cast basically a glow on a surface, and we were not aware, or I was not aware when I said, hey, let's get some of these, that you could not have anybody looking at that surface unless they were wearing protective glasses. I mean, I thought, okay, fine, you don't look into the thing because it could have caused the sort of blindness that an arc welder can cause. But it turns out that you can't have anybody looking at that sort of square of light at all without wearing the protective glasses. And we were planning on using these out in public areas. So there's no way you could guarantee, you could go to somebody and say, all right, now over there, don't look at that. What's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to look at that. So we're still thinking of getting the more expensive variant. We've sent back the others and we're getting a return. That we would have staff able to use in the mornings before buildings opened, decontaminating various surfaces, and that any staff member out in an area where they were being used would have glasses to wear, but we're not going to risk using something that could be potentially hazardous for people's eyesight in a public area. So unfortunately, that didn't work out as well as we might have wished. In better COVID news, we are getting vaccinated as part of Rollout 1B in the county. A little bit of a mix-up on that, in that we got an email from the health department saying you're part of it, and it turns out that maybe that was a miscommunication in the health department, and the county health administrator was actually waiting to hear where library employees might come, because library employees were never mentioned in the plans for the vaccine rollout at all. But we said, well, we're part of the education, in Maryland. That's where we are in Maryland's code is education, and we're frontline employees. So one of their folks gave the go-ahead, and this past Friday, a few people showed up to get it, and they said, well, we don't think libraries are a part of this. We've sorted that out. We are moving forward and getting the vaccination for our employees. And so quite a few have had a first round and will be waiting to get a second round. Obviously quite delighted about that, although sorry about any mix-up that occurred. That was, not our doing. So as I say, it looks like we'll be moving forward getting the vaccination, and I apologize to the employees who showed up. They did go back and get their vaccinations. And that kind of leads us into a discussion. I just wanted to have you ask any questions or raise any concerns, or just basically talk about moving forward. Within, all of our employees the first week weren't able to get the vaccination. So it could be 6 weeks perhaps before we have just about everybody vaccinated. So far, nobody has. You can get an exemption for medical reasons or for religious reasons from being vaccinated. So far, none of our employees have requested that. So it's possible that within 6 weeks or so, we might have everybody vaccinated in the library. Now, that will not mean that we cannot, that we let down any precautions. PPE still required in the library, social distancing still required in the library. Not going to open the meeting rooms yet, just because of concerns about the pandemic. Cases are going down in the county, though, and I think in 6 weeks, possibly slightly more, we are going to be looking at going back to at least the level of service that we gave before we restricted it again this past December, so that we will be open for walk-ins, for people to come into the stacks, and we'll limit the total number of people in the building to try to ensure social distancing, but we'll be going back to at least that level of service is my thinking on this, still taking all adequate precautions for staff. We have had one positive case now among an employee. It was not an in-library transmission, it was a family situation. So we've been fortunate in that way, but I just wanted to know what questions or concerns you might have about reintroducing service, which I'd say staff are nervous about it still, but I think by and large excited about it and determined to do it. So any questions or concerns or thoughts about moving forward? Yes, Michael.
Michael, thank you for that update. I would share that from my perspective, I'm hearing a lot of frustration from kind of people in my orbit about the library not being open right now, considering that, you know, people can go to Target and do shopping and pick up food and all these other things. And so I'm happy to hear that there's conversation about the library reopening in the limited capacity it was before. I am concerned, though, that might not happen for another 6 weeks, especially considering that students are returning to schools in 2 or 4 weeks. And so I'm wondering, you know, if it's possible to reopen the libraries sooner under those kind of very limited and reasonable conditions, requiring PPE, having a set time period when people can be in there for a short period of time, limiting capacity. I think it would be really helpful for the community to restore those services as soon as we can.
I'd say the thing that has me concerned is staff morale and staff response. We do have people concerned, but I will not say that it's impossible to do that. What I'd really like to look at is the transmission rate in the county and get advice from the county health department on whether that's going up, whether that's going down. But believe me, there's nobody more disappointed than me in the county that we are not more open than we are. We were opening that beautiful new library, and I just wanted to throw the doors open and have thousands of people there for a groundbreaking, and it's been a big disappointment that, we've been prevented from giving more services. If the rate of transmission goes down and there's talk of the Super Bowl, how many people said, I'm going to a Super Bowl party? 25% of Americans in polls said, I'm going to go to a Super Bowl party. And what happens after something like that or the holidays, it wasn't as bad for Christmas as it was for Thanksgiving, but about 2 weeks later, the transmission rate just skyrockets because people simply were not careful. So I want to look at that and see where we are in the overall transmission rate and get some sense too of what the county might be doing. Currently the county buildings are open by appointment only. So I view library services as essential. And I'd like to see us open more, but let's try to balance all these factors out is my response to that. But I'm not saying no. And you as a board, if you tell me that we're going to do that, I will make it happen.
Thank you, Michael. I think, obviously that I agree with the emphasis on safety, and we have to be prudent and responsible. I think, though, that if the schools are open and the library is not, I think we need to have a good explanation ready to explain that discrepancy to our community members.
And the schools will be on a hybrid model. And so, you know, I think that's a source of great joy for many people, and it will actually help the library because we have a lot of people who do have school-age children in the library. And so that will allow us to free up some of the scheduling that, you know, issues we face with people having to, you know, not having daycare, not having childcare. It may make things a little easier for our scheduling as well. Other questions or concerns? Yes, Carolyn, or please go ahead.
Not a question, but I would just like to say, I think they're premature to open the schools, but I am not an expert in that field, obviously. Whatever it takes to keep our staff safe. If it takes another 6 weeks, and that's very unfortunate, we all want the libraries, the schools, the stores, and everything to be open. But I think 6 weeks, if that's what it's going to take, that's what we need to do. I'm not in favor of opening the libraries at this point. I think we should just stick it out, but that's just my opinion.
Jim, you had a hand up too.
This is Janice.
Oh, hi, Janice. Go ahead.
Oh. Yeah, I agree with Carolyn, because I know with the school system, they moved the goalposts, and they, you know, it was infection rate and spread, and now it doesn't count, or that's my word for it. And so I think the more consistent we are with the policies and procedures, if we look at the numbers in the building and we open based on that, like we had started with that, but we need to look at have standards set, the standards for the building, and when we open, we can say we're following the CDC guidelines, we're looking at, you know, the issues that confront us in terms of staff, but we just need to be consistent about what we're doing, and safety is first, and that's my response. Thank you.
Yeah, Michael, I brought up this issue, and even with Smyrna, again, and not so much the immediate future, but once this infection is completely eliminated or largely eliminated, we don't know how this pandemic period has changed the needs and the requirements of people who we normally support. You know, for example, many more people had transitioned over to online resources, which is good, and certainly happened before the COVID situation. But will that change or increase, or will people go back to preferring hard copy once they're more available? They can come into the library. We don't know what the needs will be, how people have changed. That's one. And again, some of my opinions are based on very limited input, or in some cases, not so much unlimited, but a broader understanding and exposure. There's no question in my mind that COVID and its really focused on online methods, from acquiring information to enrolling in programs like vaccination, has frustrated the more senior population of the county, and has worsened or increased the digital divide. And thirdly, and again, certainly not judging the quality of education within our school system, because I have no direct experience there, but I can tell you that from other parts of the country and likely here, students have been set back a little bit in terms of their learning, in terms of their development because of COVID. So what can the library do, for example, in conjunction with the educational community, to help that gap, help eliminate some of the things that this virus has caused? So I think there's a lot of things that we don't know yet, and a lot of things we need to think ahead. Well, what can we do to help some of these problems that in some cases have been worsened by the pandemic? So all I'm saying is nothing right now, but it's something that as we get closer and closer to freedom from this infection, that we need to think about, okay, what's changed and how does that impact the services and that we can provide currently and maybe in new areas that have developed.
Well, Jim, you're absolutely right to be looking forward to that. And there's been a lot of conversation in the library community and inside our library itself. We're learning some things. Some of our virtual programs have been extremely well attended. So that may be something that we're going to have to look at continuing. Our art programs, for example, we were having 100 people come to them. So that's not something we see when we have just a regular program. And so we may be having to look at how we do our programming and be very strategic about what will be in person. The children's story times, I think, are such a great experience that those may not end up having a virtual element for any number of reasons. You'd have to have the permission of the people attending for that kind of a program to go online. We could do it separately, but when we're finding that the kind of, as it were, pre-made children's programming isn't nearly as well attended as the when we're sort of broadcasting in person. So, we're going to have to look at that. I don't think curbside services are going to be going away. We were doing it informally before the pandemic. If somebody had limited mobility or kids in a car, they could call us up and say, "Will you please bring my stuff out?" We always did. That just may be something that the public never wants to see go away. I wish we had a drive-through at all three of our libraries because that's proving to be extremely popular at Leonardtown, so much so that we're actually having to open a way for people who simply want to walk up or come on a bicycle that they don't have to go through the drive-through because we're not able to serve everybody who wants to. So it's going to be a big challenge. I think that library services will change. I think that we're going to have even more demand for job help and for computer use once we're able to open more fully as people kind of get back into the economy. I think that the digital divide you speak of is a serious issue, and libraries can be part of the solution, but not the solution. We simply don't have the resources to be an internet provider for, the county. I wish we could. Expanding our Wi-Fi into the parking lots, which we've done with the county, will be helpful. We'll have Wi-Fi devices that right now we have some just sitting there because they're not all being checked out. I think that how we use or how we provide services is going to have to be looked at very carefully. I do think there's a future for libraries, and that future will be increasingly digital, but we also know that there are a lot of people who simply want to come in our door and get a good book. And how we respond to this, I don't know to what extent people are simply going to say, all right, it's largely over, but I still am not comfortable going out into public places. This may change people's behavior long term. And how we help work with children who are behind in their educational development. As good a job as our schools did making things virtual, that digital divide would still be there in part. And simply the socialization of children has been set back. So there might be even more demand for in-person programming and for kids just to be able to come in the library and talk to each other over a program or something. So it's something that we're going to have to address and probably with maybe even fewer resources than we've had before in terms of our budgeting. that's going to be a challenge. What we're hearing right now is that next fiscal year 22, starting this July, may not be so bad for libraries, but fiscal year 23, there might be budget hits.
Yeah, and I would encourage them, again, as you're doing, is to talk to your own staffs. And again, I will continue to push this issue at a smaller level, because I think if you draw upon the collective experiences of all three county systems, because I would think they're all facing the same problem, and maybe even involving at some point in time the state librarian to really address this whole issue. What is the future of the library is going to be post-pandemic?
We've been talking a little bit at the SMERLA level with directors, deputy directors as well, and thinking about, are there some ways we can increase interoperability of programming? So a great program happens at Calvert. Rather than reinvent it at St. Mary's, we'll do a staff exchange or just have them visit. They'll give the program for us too. Same thing for us. We've got a great program going. Hey, we'll send it up the road to Charles County. They have more staff than we do and more resources than we do, which gives them a greater ability to develop programming. I mean, I'm immensely proud of our programming and what our people do. It's creative, but they simply have more staff able to do it. We've also been talking a little bit about at the SMERLA level of equity. Previously, what we saw were it had to be equal for all three counties to get SMERLA to operate. And what we're kind of hearing from Charles and Calvert, since Calvert has $1 million more a year than we do and Charles has $2 million more a year than we do, is just say, all right, what would be equitable? St. Mary's is the poor cousin. Does it always just have to be a three-way split? Or could we say, all right, St. Mary's is going to get a larger share of something? And I've not been driving that conversation. It has come from Kenneth Wayne, and it's come from Carrie, and it's come from the new SMERLA executive director, Ashley, saying, what is equity here? So I think that we're looking at a lot of changes coming forward, and some of those may be beneficial for St. Mary's County in terms of regional funding. Certainly, how we respond to this is going to be crucial for continuing library services effectively in the future, and we're going to be looking at it very carefully.
Yeah, Michael, I can address that, because fundamentally the SMERLA charter is that it provides services to all three counties. And I think we historically have adhered to that very faithfully. But I'm not convinced it closes off supporting to varying degrees among the libraries. So I think the climate is such that it's a more open issue than perhaps in prior times.
Yeah, I think so too. So, but thank you for your input on, our moving forward.
Michael,
Go ahead.
Michael, just one more issue. As you talk about equity and looking at the Lexington Park area after COVID and, all the issues with the community center, the YMCA, and, not having the money and always wanting the private partnership and fundraising and all. If the libraries once again will, until something is sorted out with that, or the library once again will be the teen center and the folks that will be taking care of the tweens and the youth in the communities. So, we need to consider that too. We need to look at, I don't know what the county government does in terms of community coordination, because if it's going to be digital, looking at the churches and having some that have facilities to support some of the, tutoring and all of that. So there's a lot to consider. But when we talk about equity, we really need to address the Lexington Park Library in terms of what it actually can do. I know they want to do so much, but what can actually be done in having the funding? I mean, if it's we're going to cut funding, and all those issues that are coming up, we need to really sit and bring people together as a community.
Well, I think that something like the program we're doing for Black Men in White Coats involving numerous community partners is something that the library does very well. I mean, we reach out and we say, how can we get people involved with this to expand our reach, to make it even more effective? I think that's something that we'll continue to do, possibly some work with the Literacy Council. I know that you've been involved with volunteer reading with young people in Lexington Park. That's something that the library might be able to expand upon when we're able to open our meeting facilities again. So that's an area of special interest and concern. I know the Lexington Park Library does a fantastic job serving that community, but reaching all of those people is going to be something that we will be paying a lot of attention to. I've always wanted to try a homework help center where it does require staff for the library. Basically, one person is in charge of getting volunteers and getting supplies, but young people show up, they can have in-person, homework help. It's not really tutoring per se. That's, professional level tutoring is something that we probably couldn't get done, but we could arrange with volunteers to help young folks with their homework, give out school supplies. That's something I'd love to try, and I've never given up on the idea, so it's still something I think that's worth considering, and that might help with some of the issues that you're talking about. And in the meantime, staff are saying, no, Michael, don't talk about that. I've never given up on the idea, so I think we have to be creative, at the same time recognize that funding is going to be a challenge for us as well. So interesting time to be in libraries. Well, I do have two action. Yes, John, please go ahead.
Back to the future of the library. I will probably always be in the camp of, I like to go in and look for a good book, but I realize that the young people don't see it that way. It might be interesting as the pandemic trails off and then eventually disappears, for us to host a seminar on the library of the future and find out what the community thinks it is.
We've done community surveys, but and the last one for our marketing report was done, and we kept trying to tell people, all right, think of the library not during pandemic times, and we'll be sharing that marketing report with you next month once it gets finalized. Laura did great work on that, and we're sort of waiting for the final go-ahead from the state who provided the funding for it to say, yeah, all right, that looks good to us. But we did a survey of what people want the library to be, and we try to say, don't look at it during pandemic times, but we still think it may have skewed the results a little bit. But I don't think we're ever going to get to a time during my library career, which I hope will be some years yet, where a lot of people don't want to come in the library and pick up a good book. We've gone more digital, but I think there's still plenty of people, and there are plenty of young people. I point to a Pew survey that was only about a year and a half ago that talked about library use, and young people were not so digitally driven. Many millennials preferred, and younger people preferred still picking up a physical copy of a book. I don't think that's going to go away. And
I don't think so either. But
pandemic,
I think being so immersed in the situation that we're in now, I think there is going to be a bias toward people, particularly the young crowd, learning how to get access to the library without actually going there. In other words, we're going to have to market ourselves to bring them back in physically if that's what we want to do. I think we need to be prepared for them to say, hey, I got along just fine doing it the other way, pandemic style. I like it. I'll keep doing it. And they're the next wave of patrons. It's not us here on this call. It's going to be them.
Well, and that's why we have this bill in front of Maryland legislation to try to make sure we're getting access to quality content that we're shut out of now, and why we're negotiating with the publishers to try to get better licensing terms, and working with the library vendors to make sure that they can support those licensing terms. This is, you're absolutely right that increasingly digital services are going to be important for us and in our programming as well. Michael, did you have something else?
Yeah, I would just say, as the parent of school-age children, obviously this has been a real slog, and despite the most valiant efforts of teachers and school administrators, our students' education has greatly suffered, their socialization has greatly suffered. A lot of students disappear into a digital black hole all day as their parents are trying to work. And I think that, a lot of young folks are really hungry for socialization and in-person interactions. And I think that, moving forward, Michael, I would ask that we really keep a close eye on what is happening with the schools. Phase 1 starts today, Phase 2 starts on February 16th, and Phase 3 starts on March 1st. And mindful that we need to look to see if the Super Bowl is going to be a super spreader event. I think it would be really valuable for us to look closely in 2 weeks, as we're in the middle of Phase 2 of the schools reopening, to look at the metrics they are using and to look at the metrics we are using, and to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the community, and that as educators, library staff, and school staff, that there's a level of consistency in terms of how we're operating to meet the needs of the community. So I just hope, especially during these next few weeks, we can be really responsive to what's going on, whether that's in a positive or negative direction.
We'll be able to make a much better call at our March 15th board meeting, I think. I should say that our Youth Services Department is eager to get back to it, so much so that we have scheduled 6 or 7 outdoor programs coming up once the weather's turned a little bit better. And we're, Leonardtown is a fairly easy place to have it, but other places might not be quite so easy to do it, our other locations. But we are looking at partners on that. So we're planning on, they're eager to get back to it. So that will at least be a start, and then we'll just have to see how quickly we can get young people back in the building. It's really frustrating for youth services staff who love to do programming that, the online is good, but it's sort of like, I call them the library rock stars. They like performing. They like being in front of a crowd. And I've been able to do a little bit of youth programming myself, and it's just a great experience to see young people getting thrilled about things related to their education. And so I know they want to get back to it. We'll be following pretty closely what the schools are doing. The school superintendent's in my Rotary Club, and we ask for regular updates from him about what's going on. So we have kind of an inside track there. So we'll be watching, and it's just going to be interesting to see as the pandemic does recede, and thankfully all these variants that are coming out now are not going to overwhelm the vaccination efforts, but to see how quickly people want to get back to what were traditional behaviors and what's going to change. I do have 2 action items for you today. The first is a change, and this is in part in response to the pandemic, but in part because this policy was written before we had personal time off, PTO, for our part-time employees. And so they were not really even factored into the policy originally. And the changes I've asked for basically are going to addressed that in part. We did have a part-time employee who tested positive for COVID and is recovering nicely, but it's a tough slog back. For some, some people are totally asymptomatic and it's no issue for them. For those who as it were, display the virus, have the symptoms, it can be a tough road back. And so, he, as a part-time employee, you have relatively limited part-time off, and so I wanted a policy that might be a little bit freer for somebody in a situation like that to be able to benefit from this policy, which was previously only benefiting primarily full-time employees. So the changes I've asked for are in blue or either crossed out. Employee may do an accrued personal sick or annual leave. That we were already doing that. It's just that the policy didn't say it. So we basically, as full-timers, as benefit employees, get personal sick or annual leave. That's the amounts are set out in the personnel manual. So I just wanted to say, okay, since we're already doing it, let's include that in the policy. While we're primarily aiming this at people who are in need, I don't think it's absolutely necessary that they have totally exhausted all their sick leave. So I asked that that be taken out. We add any annual leave will be converted to sick leave for exempt employees or PTO for non-exempt employees, and that adds them into this policy. And the other things are just, I didn't like the wording of the first one. I thought it was a little ambiguous, so I tried to set out a little bit more directly exactly what I thought that was trying to get at. So you see the new policy as I would like to see you consider it, and I ask you to do so. Yes, Sandy.
I have a question. Mm-hmm. Why do you not think it's, why did you take out the exhausting of all sick leave? You said you didn't think that was necessary. Can you kind of give me your rationale why you would donate leave to someone who still has leave on the books?
Well, it's because of the limits on our part-time employees who are not benefited in the same way that everybody else is. So part-time, basically, and this is a policy you approved maybe 3 years ago, although I've been here longer than I think maybe it was 4 years ago, did come from the employees who were part-time, that they had no leave. So they had a choice when they wanted to take off of either, making up the time some other time or simply not getting paid. And we gave them PTO. It is accrued annually. And at the start of each year, they get twice their weekly hours in PTO. So if you're a 21-hour employee, you get 42 PTO hours, which is basically 7 days during the year. We couldn't really do more because we're bare bones staffed, and so giving lots of time off meant would be a challenge for our managers to staff the libraries adequately, but they don't get a lot of time off. So I just like them in certain circumstances, and I don't see this happening very frequently, that we're going to donate leave. But under special circumstances, that those people be allowed to have a little bit more of a break. And I consider getting COVID, it is not that the person wasn't being careful, but, if you're living with a family and somebody gets exposed, it can be an issue. Well, just a little bit more opportunity to take advantage of this policy. And you note at the end, it still say if it's, if we think it's being abused or, it's a problem, we can still say, no, you can't do that. That is still in place. But that was the why, is just, could there be people who have certain special needs? And if recovering from COVID, they might have to use all their leave in the first 3 weeks. So just a little bit more opportunity later in the year to maybe take some time for a holiday or something like that. Your second question. You said you had two?
Oh, no, that was just my question.
Oh, okay.
That was it. Thank you. Thank you.
You're muted, Jim. Jim, you're muted. I'm sorry.
Yeah, again, with action items, I think we do need to conduct a hand-raising vote, even though the changes here are relatively minor, but it's a good idea to keep all action items in the same way. I'm going to suggest one change. It's grammatical. We don't want to vote on it and then go back and amend it and so forth. But in the last sentence, where you took out the director who feels that the following word should be if and capitalized. So I'll make them.
So what it would now read is, if the library director determines that the use of donating leave is jeopardizing the library's best interest, the director may curtail the donation of leave, is what it says.
It doesn't say if, though. It says if.
Mine says if.
Mine says if.
So does mine.
It's the library director who feels that that's crossed out. And now it starts with if the library director.
Okay, maybe I need new glasses. All right, then we'll vote on it. It looks like an it to me, but okay. So I'll make the motion to accept the changes to the policy.
Actually,
Can I get a second?
you were right. In the original version, it did say it, and I've since corrected it. So if you got the first version, which was originally put online, I replaced that second one, but the board doc may still say it. But you're absolutely right. It should say if. Very good. Now I've got
I copied off the board doc.
Yeah, now I've got you. Understood. Mary Ann looked at that and saw the same thing. So thank you, Mary Ann, for making that correction.
Okay, any other questions, comments? If not, all in favor of approving the changes to the employee manual indicate by raising your hand. Okay, motion carries.
Okay, the second one. Calvert and Charles have gone all jeans all the time. They let their employees wear jeans. I'm still an old stick in the mud. I'd like to see, we allow it on Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays when we're open on Sundays. I'd still like to see a slightly more professional level of dress than I think jeans is. Or it could just be that I never wear jeans myself. So right now we have, under very cold conditions, people sitting in front of doors, letting people in and out of the library, or people going out to deliver curbside. And I had a request, when this is happening, may we please wear jeans. And I didn't think I'd say, all right now during pandemic conditions, you can do that, because I didn't know if next year we might not still be doing curbside, and not necessarily because of pandemic, but just because it becomes a regular part of our operations, although we haven't determined that yet. So I just said, okay, when we're having people outside, denim is a pretty good insulator against cold weather. People are running in and out, that we would loosen this policy just a little bit. So that's kind of what that is asking you to do. It lengthens the policy considerably, but basically during the winter months, if you're doing doorway, curbside, or other outside service for the library, you could wear jeans. You can wear jeans off-site to trainings or conferences, but shouldn't wear them when you're officially representing the library as a presenter at a conference or when appearing before elected officials. Wait a little bit more dressy for those particular circumstances. So that's the changed policy I'd like to see, and I promise you're going to be heroes among the library staff if you agree to this one. Yeah, John, you're muted.
Yeah, I'll make the motion to accept the change to Employee Manual 7.2 as worded. Did I get a second?
Second.
Oh, there we go.
Second.
Thank you, John's second.
Any questions or comments? Okay, all in favor indicate by raising your hand. Opposed? Okay, the motion carries.
And thank you, Amy Ford, for bringing this suggestion from staff forward to us. Our next meeting is March 15th, and that will either be virtually or here in the Chesapeake building. Some dates to remember. Presentation to the commissioners is tomorrow, and I don't have an exact time for that, but their meeting starts at 9, so I'll be out here in the lobby, and when they are ready for the presentation, I'm going to come on in. I did send out a document. Did I get that document to all of you?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, good. I'm pretty sure I sent it out. Rather than do a PowerPoint, which I struggle with doing virtually in this environment and having it be, I think, particularly effective, I'm just going to talk about basically our open hours during the pandemic, some of the main things we've done the last 6-7 months since we last presented to them, and start looking ahead at the future, and a little bit of conversation like we just had about what our library services are going to look like. They have given us 10-15 minutes was allotted, and then time for them to ask questions. So it could be 9:30, it could be 10:15. It shouldn't be too late in the day. And you can, the board members, you received invitations to attend that virtually, and you're certainly welcome to do so, although a couple of you have told me that tomorrow just isn't going to work for you. It's certainly not required. But if you want to log in and make comments or just watch the, and library staff, you can simply watch it on YouTube. It'll be carried live. On Thursday, testimony for Senate Bill 432, that's the digital content bill, which we're hoping will make out of Ways and Means in the Senate. I'll be testifying then. Black Men in White Coats will be roughly February 26th through March 3rd, with starts of viewing on the 26th and the panel on the 3rd, roughly. At some point, we're going to see the, this is different. There's a virtual ribbon cutting for the electric vehicle charging stations in a commissioner meeting coming up. So I will let you know exactly when that happens. I don't have a date yet. And finally, our county budget hearing on the 23rd of March. The commissioners will hear from state and other agencies, which is us. They'll consider our budget submission, and we'll have an initial sense of what they are going to be thinking about the library's budget. They do have about 1.5%, it's 1.45 to be precise, more of a budget than they thought they might, which is about $5 or $6 million. As you're aware, we've asked for about $140,000 additional funding. Some of it for, the increase in minimum wage, some of it for additional utilities at the Leonardtown location, some of it for our employees to be considered for a little bit more money. So we'll have an initial sense of how they respond to that, and that will be followed by a public hearing where we can appeal if we wish to. So we'll just see how this year's budget cycle goes. Any questions about any of those moving forward? Well, Phyllis, thank you again for your service to the board and to the library. To the board, as always, I say thank you so very much for all you're doing for St. Mary's County Library. It is deeply appreciated. And everybody have a great cold day here.
Okay, and before we close up, anything else that any other board member wants to bring up? Or okay, if not, the meeting's adjourned. Michael, do you need me to stay on now for this the dedication component?